take all your federal offices and put them on separate. But you would have to change the law because it's in the law order.
I love cremation.
Prepaid cremation.
I don't know what
Change them all period right now.
Do you probably have a prepaid cremation bill in your district?
That would, like, I was
It's like an amendment. It's got an amendment. If you die in a fire, you get your money back.
Republican that wants to change.
That's funny.
I'm trying to working plan B, like cremation, but the order changes and not by
I consider you a jack of all trades. Anyway, I did send you up that.
I looked at it. The question I had looks good, but which one did you guys go with?
now.
Well, that's the pause. We went with 175.
I'm saying, like, did you just go with keeping in the variable rate that problem? Is that what you guys did?
Right.
I mean, that was.
And right,
I'd probably have to get back to it. I mean, we just took the previous gas from 2.5 down to 175.
Right.
It's supposed to get to 2.25.
but
Okay,
That's what the House,
so,
we ended up matching the House.
okay.
Whatever. I just want to make the point that in 175.
right, because it's all intertwined.
It is $50.
I'm just trying to
You mentioned yesterday.
Yeah, I was.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is April 1st, 2026. Some might call this April Fool's Day. I am Chair Delegate Melissa Wells, joined by my Vice Chair, Ken Kerr. Welcome to the Government Labor and Election Law Committee. We will begin our first bill hearing of today with SB 697, Senator Feldman.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. There's no cross-file to the bill, so just indulge me a little bit. And I do have one witness on my panel, Jared Damaris, head of our State Board of Elections, for some backup. I would note at the outset that 697 did pass unanimously out of my EEE committee and unanimously out of the full Senate. But it's just kind of a quick background. I mean, I think it's become apparent to everyone who follows the area that we've entered a new age when it comes to how democracy and the idea of free and fair elections can be skewed and mucked up by new technologies, and we as policymakers need to stay on top of it. And so to that end, Senate Bill 697 is directed at a few aspects of emerging and potentially dangerous role that social media platforms can play in our election process. So again, a little background. This bill is directed at social media platforms, not at political candidates like us. Big picture, the platforms can use algorithms to maximize social interactions. I mean, we all know this. They create feedback loops to encourage and boost engagement, which in turn fosters confirmation bias in users and all that. Nothing in that, in and of itself, to that effect is wrong. But what this bill, there's two parts of the bill. The first thing this bill tries to get at is when these social media algorithms and feedback loops are manipulated and altered by the platforms, and the purpose of the manipulation is to benefit a specific, clearly identified candidate. And under current law, that can be done without any transparency and any disclosures. And so Senate Bill 697 represents an attempt to address this issue in a couple of ways. First, increase transparency. So if the social media platform knowingly and purposely alters their algorithm to spread content benefiting a specific candidate, there is a rebuttable presumption that constitutes an independent expenditure by the platform owner. Just like if some third party bought 50 billboards in your neighborhood for your opponent, promoting your opponent, that would be considered an independent expenditure, and there would be a disclosure requirement. So you can still do it, but what the bill requires that any independent expenditure be publicized through a disclosure report developed by the State Board of Elections so that constituents, social media users can be made aware that the algorithms have been altered to promote the political agenda, et cetera. So it's a transparency bill on that level. There is a process, though, in place that I think is important. The State Board of Elections will, if they make a determination that an investigation is warranted to determine whether, in fact, this is an independent expenditure under the criteria that I mentioned, they have to notify the platform that it's the subject of an investigation and circumstances that gave rise to the investigation. After being notified, the platform is given an opportunity to be heard in a public meeting. Again, this is rebuttable, so you have an opportunity to come in and present evidence that it was for a legitimate purpose, it was paid advertising, the alteration was not for the purposes of influencing the election or some other arguments that are specifically outlined in the bill. And at the conclusion of the investigation, State Board of Election will issue a report with its findings. And if at the end of that report it determined that it is an independent expenditure, then they would be required to do this public disclosure form and requirement. And there could be some penalties involved, et cetera, if you knowingly and willingly don't do the disclosure or you've exceeded the contribution limits. There's a way of quantifying all this. So these are the same penalties that exist under current law for independent expenditures. We're just extending it to this one circumstance. Let me just clarify 2 points. It does not penalize candidates. No, the candidates themselves are not penalized unless it's determined by the board that the candidate was involved in coordinating all this. And again, anyone can say whatever they want on the platform. The platform owner can still alter the algorithm, but it requires that if an independent expenditure determination is made after the process I just outlined is complete, it has to be publicized through a disclosure report. This only applies to state and local offices, not federal. And similar legislation has passed. California, Texas has passed some legislation discouraging the distribution of AI, other falsified forms of content on social media that could influence elections. So this is sort of the era we are in. The second, I would say, much simpler part of the bill deals with the risk of foreign governments getting involved in all this, whether it's the Chinese, North Korea, or whomever, through the use of bots. So this bill, the second part, prohibits foreign nationals, which includes foreign governments, from using bots to publish, distribute, or disseminate campaign material to a person in Maryland to influence an election. It prohibits them from artificially amplifying political content to users of social media platforms to influence an election. Minnesota has passed similar legislation prohibiting foreign influence corporations from making expenditures, et cetera. So this is really about foreign governments using bots to get into our election space. So this is a bold bill. It's cutting edge. I think Maryland's uniquely positioned to be one of the leaders in the nation here as the technology evolves. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 697. And we've got Jared Damaris from State Board of Elections here to answer any particular questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator? You're just here to answer questions, Mr. Damaris?
Yes.
Okay.
Because
Delegate Kerr.
I'm confused as to how do you determine that a violation has occurred?
I'll let Mr. Merritt. So there would be an investigation. Like again, this requires knowingly and purposely altering the algorithms to specifically benefit an identifiable candidate. And, I don't know if it could be any multitude of reasons it's brought to his attention, or they would open an investigation, advise the platform that there's an investigation. They would come in a public hearing and be able to present evidence that this wasn't to do a benefit a particular candidate, it was paid advertising, or it was an organic, normal First Amendment kind of stuff. And it's rebut. So there's a presumption, but it's rebuttable. And at the end, they would make a determination whether, in fact, constitutes an independent expenditure. So there is a process. There's due process. They would have to issue a report with their findings. And again, at the end of it, All that really the bill requires is that they have to file a disclosure report, so there's transparency. And again, as I say, by akin to somebody buying 50 billboards to go after Delegate Ken Kerr, a third party would do that. That would be an independent expenditure, and you would have to do a disclosure. And this is where the technology, we've had some bills, I think maybe in here with deep fakes. We're moving in that direction. We got to keep ahead of it as policymakers. So that's, I think, hopefully that answers.
It would be
your question.
complaint-driven.
Yes, yes. So Jared Demarinis, State Administrator, for the record, yes, it would be more complaint-driven because we're not going to go into the social media concerns and ask them for any of their algorithms because that's business, their business purposes. I guess as the complaints come in and saying, well, why was this in my feed, or what? How did this, I would say, political content get in there? The company themselves would then can say, well, yeah, that's a person with $1 million, a million followers, they're influencers, the algorithm is geared towards promoting that for monetary purposes. If it's something else, I mean, they can change it for whatever various reasons, but if they had changed it for a political reason to benefit candidates, then this would kick in. And it's not prohibiting that activity. It's just saying that at that point there, it's just disclosing it and putting a monetary value on that type of advertisement into the voters' feeds, which is what they do constantly. So it's not even something where we can say, oh, it's difficult to quantify. They've already quantified that because that's how they make their money.
I see. All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, seeing no further questions from the committee. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Demarinis. We do have the next bill, SB 91, that's the State Board, or State Secretary of State, excuse me, here to present SB 91. Are they with us? Okay, I don't see anyone here to present that bill. Moving on to SB 11, State Board of Elections.
Sorry. So yes, this is a bill that you've already heard. This is our departmental bill. This one was just, so Jared Demarinis, State Administrator for the record. Basically, this is the one that changed when we make distributions for the Fair Campaign Finance Fund. The Senate had amended a provision in it to allow for the annual report to be filed not on the third Wednesday, but the fourth Wednesday, giving everyone an extra week, but the transaction period would still remain the same, which is the second Wednesday. So it just gives you 2 weeks to file the annual report rather than 1 week. And let me just say this as I did not object to that amendment, especially in other years when you have, a full year's worth of reports. We do hear a lot of treasurers saying, like, we have to scramble, which at one point we've always said you should have been scrambling earlier. So that's a different story, but I had no objections to that amendment.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Demarinis. Seeing no questions from the committee, we'll move on to your next bill that you have for the State Board, SB 100.
Yes. Sorry. Pull that up here. Yes, yes, Jared Demarinis, State Administrator of Elections for SB 100. This is another bill that the committee has approved and moved out of. It was about early voting centers and having bus stops if a county has a fixed bus route, that if an early voting center is within half a mile of that fixed bus route, that they have to stop during early voting. It's, a voter empowerment bill. And again, the committee has heard it, so thank you on that one there.
Thank you very much. Seeing no questions for Mr. Demarinis, that concludes our hearing on SB 100. We'll move on next to SB 153.
So this one here is another one that the committee has heard. Jared Demarinis, State Administrator for Elections. This is a departmental bill for and is moved out of the Senate. The committee has heard it. We're happy to work with it. It's just to tighten in a little bit about responsibilities of the treasurer and allow for campaigns a little bit more flexibility with the management of the funds, especially designating agents for making disbursements on the treasurer's behalf. Just modernizing campaign finance rules and regulations. But happy to work with the committee on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marinus. Seeing no questions from the committee, that'll conclude our hearing for SB 153. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Yep.
We'll move on to Senator Augustine, SB 241. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Wells, Vice Chair Kerr, and members of the committee. Senator Malcolm Augustine, happy to be here with you for the first time. It's great stuff. Here on behalf of Senate Bill 241, which is in the same posture as House Bill 115 that was really led by Delegate Wilkins, that you have passed, and I would just ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 241 in the same posture.
Thank you very much, Senator. Seeing no questions from the committee, that'll conclude the bill hearing on SB 241. Oh, so sorry, my bad.
I do have a quick
Delegate
question.
Schmidt.
It just came to mind. Sorry, we had moved down quickly. There was an amendment on that at some point from Department of Corrections. Is that correct?
I do believe that there was an amendment. We just wanted to get the language right, such that it would be in keeping with the way that it occurs when folks are introduced into the system, that it would be in the same posture when they're coming out.
Okay.
And that, we did respond to their amendment request.
You did respond, okay.
Yes,
And
we did.
I believe it was something regarding the social security number and the data releases. I'm looking.
That I'm not familiar with.
Let me pull up the amendment here.
We simply met the same requirements as they are, the information that was required to be sent to the Board of Elections, in essence, having them be in the same posture when they go into incarceration
Okay.
versus when they come out. That was the amendment that was requested.
So it's matching the requirements,
Yes,
basically? Okay,
correct.
because I think there was some questions regarding additional requirements that they were concerned about.
Yeah, no, we worked it out
Okay.
with them and with the Board of Elections to ensure that each party had the information that they needed.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you for clarifying that. And
Sure.
sorry for jumping in there late.
All good.
Yep, thank you, Senator.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome, thank you. Seeing no further questions from the committee, that'll conclude the hearing on SB 241. Thank you, Senator. We'll move next to Senator Carrozza, SB 443.
Good afternoon. For the record, Senator Mary Beth Carrozza representing Maryland's coast, and that's Worcester, Wycomico, and Somerset counties. And Madam Chair, nice to see you in that position, and the Vice Chair, and making history with my first presentation to this committee. Asking for your support for Senate Bill 443, Local Boards of Elections, Board Council Qualifications, and to ask you for a favorable report. This legislation unanimously passed the Maryland Senate, and its cross-file House Bill 621 was approved on a consent calendar by the Senate Education Environment Committee yesterday. And so I wanted to give you that update. This emergency legislation would modify a provision that authorizes a local board of elections to appoint or retain an individual as counsel that is a registered voter of the state rather than a registered voter of the local board's county. This would enable, Senate Bill 443 would enable each of our local boards of elections, especially our smallest jurisdictions like Caroline County, to quickly and efficiently hire counsel when necessary. This is a common sense modernization of our standards for local boards of election counsel, and it's supported by the Maryland Association of Election Officials and the Caroline County Board of Elections. I thank you for your kind attention, and I would ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 443.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Senator Carrozza. Seeing no questions from the committee, that'll conclude our bill hearing today on SB 443. Thank you.
Thank you for your courtesy.
Absolutely. Move next to SB 758, Senator Watson. I don't know if there's anyone from his office. Hi, is here to present. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, good afternoon, Chair Wells and Vice Chair Kerr and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Savannah Grooms. I'm an intern of Senator Ron Watson, who is a proud representative of Legislative District 23. And I'm here today to ask for a favorable report for Senate Bill 758, Common Ownership Communities Candidate or Proposition Signs Display Period. 758 is a cross-file of House Bill 858, sponsored by Delegate Holmes, which has already passed through this committee this year. This introduction is a reminder of what you've already passed and heard. Senate Bill 758 is a simple bill that will change the provisions that restrict the display of candidate or proposition signs authorized by common ownership communities, which includes HOAs, cooperative housing corporations, and condominiums. This bill will allow homeowners to display their candidate or proposition signs for up to 45 days prior to the start of early voting or 45 days before a primary or general election. This is an emergency bill because we want this bill enacted immediately in order to take effect for this year's upcoming elections. This bill is important because it ensures homeowners freedom of expression. As the legislative body, we should encourage our constituents to engage in political activity, and this bill does just that. Senator Watson introduced this bill last session, and it's my hope that we will succeed in passing this bill this year. This bill has no state or local impact, local physical impact, so I hope that you guys have a favorable report on SB 758. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great job with your testimony. Seeing no questions from the committee, that concludes the bill hearing today on SB 758. Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll move next to SB 848, Senator Gallion. Don't know, okay, hello, your staff is here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and the GLE committee members. For the record, Jordan Glassman on behalf of Senator Gallion to introduce SB 848, Municipal Elections, Information on Candidates and Voting Procedures and Locations. The bill is amended and passed by the Senate is identical to HB 1448, sponsored by Delegate Tomlinson, passed unanimously by this committee. We respectfully ask for a favorable report on SB 848.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Seeing no questions from the committee, that will conclude our hearing today on SB 848. Thank you again.
Thank you.
We'll move on to SB 29, Senator Kagan. Quite a few bills for Senator Kagan. I saw her. She stepped out. We have next Senator Hester. Okay, I don't think I see Senator Hester. Senator Sidnor, I saw.
Do you want me to do 91? Or you do the Secretary of State?
Oh, you're able to present that one? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Please state your name again for the record, because we don't know who you are.
Exactly. So
we will have
I was like, just
SB 91.
Sure.
Thank
Jared
you.
Demarinis, State Administrator, State Board of Elections. SB 91 is another bill that this committee has heard and has done well with. It's the address confidentiality program. It's just designating a point person at the State Board of Elections to be working with the Secretary of State's office and have all the communications with individuals on that program. So it streamlines the process and allows individuals on this program access to the ballot without confusion or dealing with the local boards. So it just streamlines the process.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Demarinis. Seeing no questions from the committee, that will conclude the hearing on SB 91. So we will now move to Senator Sidnor for SB 255. And I know he's joined by Adam to help answer questions.
I get to have a friend? Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. Senator Charles Sidnor, speaking in support of Senate Bill 255, which is a bill that I believe you heard from Delegate Wims. And so, as we all know, with this election year, Maryland voting rights have become increasingly vital. And some of our elections, they had already begun in February. And Marylanders will have to be placing their faith in electoral systems that represent them fairly and equitably. Unfortunately, our systems do not always live up to those expectations. Polarized voting in local elections is not a hypothetical problem in the state of Maryland. In 2022, after a federal court determined that Baltimore County produced a racially discriminatory redistricting map, the county was forced to create a map that complied with the Federal Voting Rights Act. In Caroline County, the town of Federalsburg, with a black population of 43%, elected its first black city council members since its founding 200 years ago after a lawsuit and charter amendments in 2023 changed the electoral system. Most recently, Wacomico County settled a lawsuit which alleged that their partial at-large voting systems denied black voters equal rights or equal voting opportunities to participate in the political process. So by implementing a more equitable map and system, we move forward. Last year, my county narrowly avoided another possible lawsuit stemming from the county council's creation of a new 9-member council map without any meaningful input from the public or from a redistricting commission. The council eventually passed an acceptable map last September. Now, many provisions of the bill that you all have in front of you have remained the same as the version that we passed and it came over to the House last year. Section 15.7-106 explicitly provides a private right of action, allowing the Attorney General and individuals and organizations the opportunity to bring lawsuits to enforce fair voting. Section 15.7-104 describes the factors that our courts would be charged with considering when determining whether polarized voting occurs. Under Senate Bill 255, a plaintiff would still have to establish that a county or municipal election exhibits polarized voting and that the particular method of election dilutes or abridges the voting strength of a protected class member's ability to influence the outcome of an election. And just like last year, the plaintiff will not be required to prove that there was any discriminatory intent. There are some new provisions and clarifications that were added as a result of conversations that we had over the summer. First, Section 15.7-107 allows the court to award a prevailing private plaintiff reasonable attorney's fees, expert witness fees, and costs. Virtually all civil rights laws, including the Federal Voting Rights Act, include this type of fee-shifting provision to empowered, affected communities secure and effective counsel. Secondly, in response to federal cases in the 5th and 6th Circuits, 15.7-101C explicitly enables coalitions of multiple protected class members, such as Black voters and Asian American voters, to bring an action based on combined dilution or abridgment. And again, this is something that we saw happen in Baltimore County when they had an opportunity to draw a 5-4 map. They did not do so. They drew a 6-3 map because where you had some communities that could have been combined over in Northeast Baltimore. They chose not to. Finally, in addition to the 5 probative factors from last year's bill, 15.7-104B describes in more detail how courts may determine whether polarized voting has occurred. Now, I do know that in some conversations that I've had with some members here, there have been discussions regarding some possible changes and amendments that might be being considered on this side. So I wanted to point out, I think one, it's my understanding that Delegate Long had a bill that dealt with local school board elections. This bill does not do that. This bill was focused specifically on municipal elections and local elections. The challenging portion of trying to pull in school boards is then you're likely pulling in the state, and we were not trying to have a bill that was going to be used as a tool in state elections. And secondly, I understand that there was some conversation around limiting the certain remedies that a plaintiff might be able to use, and I would discourage that you do that. Again, we have to really think about the times that we're living in, where the federal government, this federal administration, is attempting to make it as difficult as possible, not only for non-citizens to vote, but for citizens to vote, with whether it be the SAVE Act or even what's happening in our judicial system. So we believe that the flexibility that this bill has it hits the right point where the legislation should be. So with that, rest and ask for a favorable committee report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Sidnor. Just seeing if we have any questions from the committee for you. All right, seeing none, that will conclude our hearing today on SB 255. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We'll move next to Senator Kagan. And we'll begin with SB 29, Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's so cool to be in Glee for the first time. Congratulations to all of you for being on the rockingest, coolest named committee. And I just want to give a shout out not only to you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, but to Stan Ward, who is nationally respected on election stuff and who I've had the great privilege of working with through NCSL, National Conference of State Legislatures. For the record, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, and I am delighted to present 4 bills to you today, and I suspect that they will be at least a little familiar to some of you. Senate Bill 29 is about making sure that voters know what they're voting on a ballot measure before they're asked to complete their ballot. This has passed the Senate unanimously many times, including this year, and it is, there are 23 states that already have laws like this. We have, I'm going to hold up a very pretty map, just so you see that it is red states and blue states. It's all over the country that already have laws on their books to make sure that voters are aware of the proposal before us. We used North Dakota, California, Hawaii, Idaho, Mississippi, and New Jersey, a real cross-section, to come up with this language. And there were 400,000 voters who cast a ballot in 2022 for governor who did not complete their ballot. And I will just read one quick example of why it is that people find our ballots the way we generally do them. They find them to be confusing. So in 2022, the year that I just referenced, here was question number 2. Quote, adds to the eligibility requirements to serve as a senator or a delegate to the Maryland General Assembly by requiring a person to have maintained a primary place of abode in the district that the person has been chosen to represent. Under current law, a person must have resided in the district to which the person has been elected for at least 6 months immediately preceding the date of the person's election, or if the district has been established for less than 6 months prior to the date of the election, as long as the district has been established. The new law requires, beginning January 1, 2024, a person must have both resided in and maintained a primary place of abode in the district for the same time periods as under current law. Holy Christ, does the average person, let alone someone who doesn't have a graduate degree or have English as their native language, have any idea what they are being asked? The contrast in 2022, we had, do you favor the legalization of the use of cannabis by an individual who's at least 21 years of age on or after July 1, 2023 in the state of Maryland? People understood what they were being asked. So this sets up a process, guardrails, and makes it clear that we want our voters to understand if we're asking for their opinion, we want to make sure that they feel ready to give it. The one thing that is changed from when I've been here before is if ballot language comes from the General Assembly, that language goes right in. We hope it will be comprehensible to the voters, but we just want to make sure that if we craft something specifically, that that's not amended. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Senator. Delegate Chisholm.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for bringing this bill up because it does make sense. I'm sure, like me, you get calls on Election Day and people are like, what do you think about title question? And I'm like, I have no idea what it is.
Exactly.
But how do we make that decision? Because I agree with you, it is very confusing. Would we have a bipartisan commission or, I guess, group look at it and say, all right, this makes sense so that the public understands what we're actually asking here?
Yes. So Jared, is Jared still here? Jared left. So the bill sets up the process so that language can be proposed. It'd be posted on a website. There can be legal challenges in court to make sure that everyone thinks, proponents and opponents think that the bill language is comprehensible. There's a lot of time to work it out before we finalize the ballots and send them forward. Chair, do you want to add anything to that?
Which was,
Simplify
I can re-ask the question. We're talking about
the process.
the plain language, really, that goes onto a ballot when we're asking a ballot question of. My question was, do we have like a Republican and a Democrat task force, commission, whatever, determine, yes, this is fair, because as you know, oftentimes, you know, a question goes onto a ballot and it's so confusing and convoluting and nobody understands it. How do we make sure that we get back to the plain language that both sides, Green Party, Independents, everybody understands this is really what we're asking? Because sometimes it's either confusing or misleading.
Right.
so yes, Jared Demarinis, State Administrator of Elections, Maryland State Board of Elections. So right now, for a state question, the Secretary of State is the one that drafts it. So the Secretary of State would be the one that has to then abide by the plain language provisions of it and making sure that it meets that standards. Once it goes out, we publicize the question. At any point there, then anybody can sue on the question to see if it's misleading or if it doesn't comply with the standards as proposed under this law. For county questions, it's the county attorney that does the exact same thing. All our ballot, of course, is publicized. So for example, I just have the dates in my mind for the primary, but like on April 21st, right, we put out for a publication the ballot, which, you know, at that point there. So we do the same thing in the general election. So they would be out there on our website for review. The state questions would already be on our website for review. At any point there, then individuals would have the opportunity to sue to say that it didn't meet the plain language standard. But the process and who writes it still remains the same.
And if I could just add one more thing. In the bill, Delegate Chisholm, it specifically says that it can't use the passive voice, legal jargon, or double negatives. There's some things that voters find especially confusing, and that would be part of a court's analysis.
Right. Because I love the intent of the bill, I really do. I just want to make sure that we're asking questions of the public that aren't misleading. Like, for instance, we asked a while ago, do you approve of a balanced budget? Well, of course, everybody's
Right.
yes. So, but thank you, I appreciate the answer.
Thanks for the question.
Seeing no additional questions, that will conclude the testimony on Senate Bill 29. The next bill up is Senate Bill 65. Senator Kagan.
Excellent. So this bill always blows people's minds. For the record, Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Democrats and Republicans over the years have had exploratory committees. The Ken Kerr for Governor Committee can raise unlimited amounts of money, can spend it on anything they want, and there is no transparency, there are no guardrails, there are no limits. This just does that. So it is illegal to put caps on the amount of money that people can spend. The Supreme Court has been clear that that's First Amendment free speech, but we right now have no transparency. So people can legally donate millions of dollars to an exploratory campaign. The candidate or the exploratory committee can then spend it on, I give an example of buy a new car. All of that is legal today. And this bill simply says you have to spend it on campaign stuff, that is to advance a candidacy in an exploratory way. So you can do a poll, you can build a website, you can hire staff, you can rent headquarters, you can do all the things that we do when we're running a campaign. After the candidate either decides to run, decides not to run, or the filing deadline has passed, then the exploratory committee has to be disbanded, and there it addresses what happens to that. But you can't prepay for a bunch of TV time with that money. You can't prepay for stuff. You can sell the computers for fair market value. It lays out the guardrails as to how things can operate. Right now, this is an enormous loophole in our campaign finance law, and this bill and its crossfile seeks to reasonably close it, increase transparency, and put limitations. Happy to take any questions.
Delegate Sample Hughes.
Chair. Thank you, Senator. Just real quick question for you. After it's disbanded, is that money able to then be donated to like a nonprofit?
Thank you. Perfect question. So the answer is yes. It can be returned pro rata, the percentage of it to the donors. It can be given to the state central committee or the state party by that person's political party or the local party, and it can be given to area nonprofits.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks for
Thank
the
you, Mr.
question.
Chair.
Delegate Fair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to follow up on that question, good to see you, Senator. And wonderful, wonderful bill that we've actually already discussed in subcommittee before, too. And so just to be clear, the folks that raise money for these these entities, they can't utilize this money just for anything. They can currently use it for any of their own personal expenditures, but the bill will actually help highlight that they can't use it, for example, if I wanted to raise unlimited amount of funding and then kind of shadow fund my entire campaign and buy all the election materials up front and all that. I can't do all that. Is that correct?
This would put the guardrails so that could no longer happen. Today, all of that could happen. But the one thing that cannot change is the unlimited fundraising. That will happen as an exploratory because that is constitutional. We just want to know that you're spending it on valid campaign expenditures, and then, as Delegate Sample Hughes asked, that if afterwards you're dispersing the money in an appropriate way.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Delegate Fair.
Seeing no additional questions, that will conclude the bill hearing on Senate Bill 65. Let's take up Senate Bill 237. Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville with the cross-file of a Delegate Dana Stein bill. And both the House and the Senate versions of this bill have passed unanimously. I have to say that on this one, the House got it right. And so we want to make sure that the Senate bill, for your consideration, we would be delighted if you wanted to amend the Senate version to conform with the House version. And what this is about is those who pledge to vote one way for a presidential candidate and then are faithless and they vote against what they have pledged to do. This is not a hypothetical, and in these divisive times when members of the Electoral College are being threatened, we want to make clear that the votes are cast appropriately. And there have been in recent years, there were 10 attempts in 2016 in the presidential election. So we want to make sure that we are doing right by the voters for the next presidential elections. I hope you will vote this bill with the House amendments. Happy to take any questions.
Questions for Senator Kagan? Seeing none, that will conclude the bill hearing on Senate Bill 237. And your final bill of the day, Senator, Senate Bill 670.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Maryland Association of Election Officials, known as MAO, Cheryl Kagan, still Cheryl Kagan, still very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. MAO, the Maryland Association of Election Officials, is comprised of the election directors of all 24 jurisdictions, and they asked me to sponsor this bill. This is the cross-file with Delegate Dana Jones's bill. There's no fiscal note, there's no implication other than making sure that our polling places stay safe. Again, in these divisive times, we anticipate or worry about or want to make sure that we are prepared for any problems that could go wrong at an early voting center or a precinct location. So currently, if there were a problem, and that's within 100 feet of a polling place, if someone were to be violent or try to talk to a voter that they're not supposed to be talking to, there is only one person, it's only a judge, a precinct judge, who can intervene. And that person may be helping a voter with disabilities. They may be on a quick bio break. They may just not be available. So this makes sure that we're going to be able to keep the peace, keep law and order, and make sure that the county director or their designee, and then the Senate has amended with some small technical amendments to include the state administrator of elections or their designee if there were to ever be such a need. So we ask in this case, and Delegate Jones is okay with this, and Mayo requests that the House conform to the Senate bill. Happy to take any questions.
Questions for Senator Kagan? Seeing none. Thank you, Senator
all.
Kagan.
Great to be here. Good luck to you in these final days.
So that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 670. I saw Senator Hester. She may have stepped out. We'll give her just a moment to come in.
She's coming.
Okay. Welcome, Senator Hester.
Hello. It's great to be here. You guys have the best committee over here, and the only committee with windows. That's an added bonus,
Well,
right?
yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair Kerr, members of the Government, Labor, and Elections Committee, including Delegate Wu. So glad to see you all today. For the record, Senate Bill 141, presented by Senator Katie Fry Hester from Howard and Montgomery counties. For context, you have already heard the cross-file of HB 145 presented by Vice Chair Feldmark. But I just wanted to take a few moments to really explain it because we've been working so closely on this bill for the past couple of years. It did pass, Senate Bill 141 passed out of the Senate unanimously with only one committee amendment. So last year, the Ways and Means Committee heard a similar bill, which almost made it out of conference committee. But over the interim, we worked with State Administrator Jared Demarinis and Delegate Feldmark to make some key changes to really help the bill pass constitutional muster. I want you to think about this year's upcoming elections. Picture your favorite polling place. Now picture seeing a video on social media of your favorite polling place with a dozen ICE agents there. So this is probably going to happen. It's probably going to be artificially intelligence, done with deep fakes. But my guess is that if that happens, people will be afraid to go there and vote. And so what this bill does is it takes a very narrow approach to dealing with deep fakes and AI in this specific way. So specifically, the bill prohibits a person from knowingly creating, using, and disseminating a deepfake that produces materially false information if they have the intent to impede or influence a voter's decision to cast a ballot, misrepresent facts relating to voter registration, voting methods, or election results, or attempt to induce another individual to sign or not sign a petition for a question to appear on a ballot. Importantly, the bill also requires the State Board of Elections to be able to correct election misinformation. So in my example of the ICE agents at the polling place, the State Board of Elections could put out a similar video saying like, hey, I'm here at this polling place and there's no ICE agents here, come back, it's safe. To safeguard First Amendment protections, the bill includes clear carve-outs for satire and parody, as well as for broadcast and print media, where appropriate disclosures are provided. Similarly, to protect broadcast and print media, the amended draft of the bill clarifies that any group that is exempt from the requirements of the second section of the bill, which criminalizes the distribution, is also exempt from the actions taken by the State Board of Elections. There's one additional piece of context I wanted to share with the committee. Concerns related to the deep fakes of the candidates themselves is being addressed in a separate bill, SB 8, which has passed out of the Senate and focuses squarely on the use of AI to impersonate someone else under the identity theft statute. And this bill was heard in judiciary yesterday. So with respect to SB 141, it's a proactive measure to prevent voter disenfranchisement before the harm occurs, because once voters are misled and elections disrupted, the damage really can't be undone. As the bill passes out of the Senate, there are several key amendments to appease the concerns of the broadcast and press and key stakeholders to bring them on board. First, it clarifies that the creation of a deepfake is also prohibited in addition to its dissemination and use. Second, when explaining the circumstances under which the State Board may file a civil action, it changes the language from the entity that published the deepfake to the person that created, used, or disseminated the deepfake to more accurately assign the responsibility and protect the rights of the news media. It explicitly exempts broadcast and print media from the action by the State Board, and it removes the requirement that broadcasters who have been paid to publish a deepfake, which includes in like an ad, for them to have made a good faith effort to establish that it was legitimate. So we think that with these changes, it adds clarity regarding who is responsible for violations and under what circumstances, and more closely protects the essential rights of media to broadcast the information that they receive. And so with the 2026 election approaching, I urge your favorable report on Senate Bill 141.
Thank you very much, Senator Hester, for your presentation for the bill. Seeing if we have any questions from the committee. All right, seeing that there are no questions, that'll conclude our bill hearing on SB, which one was that, sorry? Yeah. 141, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator. I know, thanks so much, I appreciate the support. All right, with that, we will adjourn, and then we will reconvene for a vote session.
Good job.